You're asking me things I hadn't thought about for a long time.
Is this the first time you've talked this in detail about your drumming?
Yeah. You know, I wouldn't think to spend a couple of days doing it normally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a chance to talk in depth with your dad just about drums, like on a project like this?
Sometimes like with conversation, but never as in detail as going through pretty much everything, like looking at all of his kits. Like there was always questions of like, hey, what were you using then? Or
How did you get started playing drums and what made you want to pick up the sticks in the first place?
Phil Collins, his drumming has such a unique sound and style that you know immediately when you hear it, that's that guy.
This is how I want my stuff to sound.
Man, what an incredible voice.
I mean, he can get out there and sing. Like, he has like so many, he's multifaceted careers.
Why just do this? Why not expand your horizons? So I jumped at it.
I think the general public know Phil Collins from like his solo work. Very popular and very good as a singer, right?
When you first realized that you couldn't play drums the way you used to, what were the thoughts going through your mind?
Well, just feels so strange to hold a pair. I'm Phil Collins, and I'm a drummer.
Who's Phil Collins? That's a good question. That is the question.
I'm not very good listening to myself sing.
really,
Prefer to listen to myself drum.
Good morning. How's it going, man? Pretty good? Morning? We'll take you upstairs and,
Hello.
yeah. All right, and we're just in here. This is where we'll be.
Okay.
All right, so this is where we're filming. Interview
I like the
room.
spot, man. I'm really excited to learn about the creative process, not only with his writing, but just like the drumming in the kind of earlier years.
And then the best room, cases.
It's about when I was 3, I got for Christmas, I got a drum, you know, plastic drum. I have very vivid memories of sitting and playing with this drum. And I took to it instinctively, I think.
Did he use these recently, or these?
I mean, I don't know if they were repurposed. I'm assuming, I mean, if we open them, I don't know what they look like.
Well, let's open them up.
Yeah,
I'll let you do the honors.
I don't know. I'm gonna start with the big one.
And then when I was about 4 or 5, they made me a little drum kit with crosswood, with poles sticking out, and on the, you know, there was a triangle and there was a cymbal and, you know, like a small drum.
Oh, hi-hat stand. Yeah, I'm guessing there's
Yeah,
stuff
let's do it.
underneath.
Let's we can put it all on the floor.
It was something I could sit at, and I thrashed along to the television, and it got louder and louder until I was banished to the bedroom.
Sticks. Maybe there's some.
Yeah, what does he have?
I don't
in
know
there?
if there's gonna be some original like.
Maybe there's some beat up sticks from the last tour.
Hey guys, it's Nick here. Hope you're enjoying the video so far. We had a great time shooting it in Switzerland. Just wanted to let you guys know that we've actually put together a free ebook for you guys. It includes some behind the scenes photos, some information about the music, and some sheet music for all the drummers out there as well. It'll help you get more out of the video, and it's completely free for you guys. So check it out at the link in the description.
There was a guy across the road that had a snare drum and a bass drum. So my mum or dad, or mum and dad, they bought that for me. And then I started to slowly expand on that and play along to records.
Do you know what these are?
I don't. I mean, I'm guessing they look like a throne because I think the way it
With
is.
2 legs.
Ah, here you see.
Here's the good stuff.
Nicholas, look.
What is that?
Wow. Wow.
Drums for Nicholas.
Yes, so thank you, Daddy.
You said that when you were 17, you gave up acting and you told your parents that you wanted to be a drummer. Was that a major turning point for you?
So I'm not going to go through 50 years of this. Don't worry. My dad particularly was very proud of me being in the West End, you know, in Oliver, which was a huge show. And I was the Artful Dodger, you know, so he had bragging rights on that. Suddenly I was going to join a pop band.
You know how you like go up to your parents and you share this idea with them of, you know, wanting to maybe become a drummer, and they might be skeptical about it, but then you can come back to them and be like, hey, but you guys do know Phil Collins, right?
You know, I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I became a professional auditioner. Just answered the back pages of Melody Maker and went for auditions. You know, the auditions were good, but I never seemed to get anything. Don't know why, but I went to the Genesis audition with a friend of mine. Genesis required a drummer sensitive to acoustic music. And it was just a job as far as I was concerned. But I do remember that I was very aware of what Genesis were becoming, you know. I mean, they were always in the back pages of Melody Maker doing gigs. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work, you know. But there was one band that were on the south coast of England. I rang them up, you know, and I said, well, where do you want me to go to audition? And they said, well, you want to come down here to Bournemouth, which was this place on the south coast. And I said, I'll call you back. So I called them back and I said, my mum doesn't really like me to travel. I'm joining a band, right?
He's a phenomenon. Everybody knows him like I do from Genesis, the band Genesis.
He's really criminally underrated as a prog icon.
I mean, Peter Gabriel said that as soon as he saw me sit down on a drum stool, he knew that I was a drummer. And I got a call to say I got the job, but all went slowly downhill from there.
Genesis, my gosh, we would listen to it and we would study it.
If you don't go back and listen to Brand X or listen to the early Peter Gabriel era Genesis, you won't even get that side of him.
I joined in 1970 and we borrowed a place called the Maltings, which was where, I don't know what they used to do with it, but it was full of pigeons and pigeon crap and, you know, but we got it for nothing. And we just started throwing some ideas together. You know, there was just the four of us, Peter, Mike, Tony, and me.
The musical box, drums don't come in until like almost 4 minutes into the song, but he's shredding, almost like on the verge of metal shredding.
It is comical to think how much metal he inspired.
And it became a big stage song, which kind of shrunk as the years went by to, it was just the end section.
The bass drum doubles, it's like, oh yeah, he's got a wicked right foot.
So you're all doing like these doubles on the kick.
Yeah.
Do you remember like what inspired you to do that, or like if you'd heard that before? Because that's pretty, you know, pretty novel at the time. I mean.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I'm gonna set this up. I don't know how this works.
I mean, I was 19 when we did this track, but I moved my foot back so that it was my foot doing it as well as the tension.
It's not even like a modern one.
No, yeah. No, I mean, all of this, dude, is probably the same stuff he's been using forever.
You know, I used to play two bass drums.
Oh, you played double kick at one point?
But then I realized that, you know, I'd try and do it with one.
There you go. My dad swears by the Speed King.
I used a Speed King pedal as well, and they were pretty basic.
But I remember like I got like a new DW like 9000 double pedal. I was so excited about it.
Yeah.
And I brought it to my dad and he was like, well, it's not a Speed King, is it? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it was you and Bonham and like all those guys swore by it.
Nick, are you a fan of the Speed King?
From the times I've used it, not really. Look, I mean, it's already fallen apart.
And I could tell if it was an old one or a new one, you know, because it gets played in, you know. And no, I love them.
At that time, years ago, the gear wasn't that great. You were always generally uncomfortable performing at that level. You crashed a cymbal and it fell over. Your drums are falling apart.
Dude, it just annoys me how every time I pick it up, it falls apart. Like,
it's like this throne.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, you know, we're talking about the Dark Ages.
The pedals wore down fast enough, so you were sometimes fighting the movement of the pedal. The gear nowadays is like a hot knife through warm butter. You just sit down, it almost plays you.
And look how small the throne is.
It seems like the most uncomfortable thing to play for like 3 hours a night.
The thing which I didn't think about for this was, you know, the conversation with two stools. Because I used to send my drum tech out to buy stools, you know. He got so pissed off. We'd go to sound check, and I'd stand there and play on one of the stools he'd bought. And I'd ask the sound man what it sounded like. He said, I think number 2 sounds better. And then we started doing all the dancing.
Mm-hmm. Not much, you know, that's not comfortable to sit on for a whole set. You know what I mean?
I've got a picture here of the drum kit you were playing on the Nursery Crime tour. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have on your kit?
Yeah. I went to a drama school. The son of one of the teachers played with Joe Cocker. He had this drum kit, this scratch drum kit, that he was, you know, asked if I'd be interested in buying, and it was white pearl. Beautiful drum kit, I mean, you know. But I took all the plastic off, the white pearl, put it back together again, you know. And that was my basic kit with Genesis.
Would you ever find yourself wearing a Genesis shirt these days?
You know, so that's the same kit. You know, I put silver.
It's just so funny, like how different the setups are over the years.
Because I used to do so many different things. I'd think about what the music was going to be like and bring the whatever drums I felt were appropriate.
He always played what was right for the music. And that's the sign to me of a real like musician that knows how to play for the song, what the right thing is.
It's always super musical. There's always like shape and dynamics and breath and
how to play what's best for the song. His drumming is definitely, it's a clinic in that.
It's the song you're playing for. You don't play a song and try to put your chops in if it's not helping the song.
It was never this ego-driven drumming thing. It was always the drumming in the context of songs.
Never mind his off-the-charts technical abilities, which you can hear incorporated within.
How can you do those things in a musical way too at the same time, but extremely technical?
You want to be able to use your imagination and have that imagination be unique. And I think that that's what he has.
There's one part I wanted to ask you about, and I don't know if you maybe don't remember that you did this, but there's a fill that you do here, and I wanted to know if you recognized it. Was that something in your locker before you used it for real?
Where's this? Seconds Out?
Yeah, 77.
I don't know. Brute force and ignorance, I guess. You know.
I don't even know how to set this up.
A sweat towel?
that was Puds as he was putting all of his back in.
Before we got the drums, Pud, your dad's drum tech for how many years?
I'm not that great at math, but it was since 1975 with Brand X. Oh God, where's Pud?
Maybe Phil will get mad at us for setting it up.
Oh, there,
wrong.
you see, I think it was like that.
75, so yeah, a long time. So he helped ship all these drums here, and he sent us this email of like detailed instructions, like don't touch the memory locks, do this, put this tom here.
He told out on the phone, he goes, don't touch them, okay? Yeah. Like, so I think this is the one we have. We were talking about, and I think this is the kit that we have out. It's got the same badges, and it's black, and I think this is kind of what he used onwards.
This photograph was sent to me by Roger Powell, who was the drummer with The Action. And he said, do you really need all that? And I must admit...
His kit setup, often he plays a very large kit, but he never looks like it's cumbersome or anything. He whizzes around the kit very effortlessly.
I wouldn't be surprised if the memory locks are still the same from
Probably
back in.
with the red Sharpie.
Yeah. So I'm assuming the red mark is at the top. I mean, that's very satisfying when there's a memory lock that works.
So we're gonna see if we can follow his instructions and see if Phil is happy with the way we set it up.
See what I mean? All the worn out cases.
Yeah.
You know, with a 20-inch bass drum, right? 10, 12, 15, right? 16, 18.
How many drummers does it take to set up a kit? Or to freaking set up a Speed King?
Just, that sound. No one came close to that, man.
You wanna have a seat?
Did we pass the test?
Yeah. So good to start again now.
Do it again.
My good friend Taylor Hawkins would always come to me, and he was always like, Chad, you gotta Lamb Lies down on Broadway, man.
I mean, I have my Japanese copy right here, so start to finish, that's just one big, beautiful piece of music.
I remember my older brother Joel coming home with Seconds Out, and I saw the album cover with all the Boeing 747 lights shining down on the stage, and I was like, what's that? And back then, you'd sit with headphones and you'd look at the album art and you'd read the lyrics, you'd read everything. Where was it recorded? That really tethers itself into you for life.
People would ask me, like, you know, well, how long do you guys rehearse for the tour? And generally, we rehearse about a month. He really embraced every aspect of the live performances. And I would always commend him because there's nothing better than preparation.
What would you say was the most difficult part of playing in Genesis? Was it the music? Was it the personalities in the band?
Genesis?
Yeah.
No, we always got on great. I mean, there was never any backstage fights or anything like that.
He would do this thing where like they'd play a show and he'd get the board audio from that show, go back to the hotel, listen to the whole show, and then make notes and put them under the band members' doors for what they could do better.
Almost to a fault, he's the most hands-on guy I ever worked with.
I mean, you know, one tended to walk away because you could see it coming, you know?
Yeah. He stopped doing it. But he realized that, like, A, that was a total dick move, and B, that, like, you know, that was like psycho behavior right there.
Yeah. You know, no, it was most of the time a happy band.
You go, man, take it easy, or you're gonna stress yourself into a stroke here with this.
We did a lot of laughing, actually.
Talking about Genesis, did you have any pre-show rituals or routines that you would go through before you would play in front of an audience?
I think they were touring like Russia or something like that, and the traffic was so bad that we missed it, and I was livid. I missed the huddle.
Oh, yeah.
Times, but...
Oh, yeah. They left late and got stuck in traffic, and Nick rushed backstage to do the huddle. I said, we've missed the huddle now, we've got to go on stage.
I missed the huddle. I walked into the arena crying. I'm like, you got to do a huddle. They did like a mini one with like 6 band members.
Anyway, so we did a little private huddle just for you.
you remember who came up with that? Was that you, or was it Mike on the bass, or like, you know, how? Because that's, I mean, pretty much the whole song for the most part relates around that section.
I don't remember who came up with it. It's probably me.
Might as well take the credit for it.
His ability to camouflage something it's hard to play, it's a challenge, but also people could dance to it.
What bongs?
Yeah, you know. No, I mean the fills, like, you know, you know.
You knew where to put the drum fill. It wasn't always in the obvious place.
The fills are coming when you don't expect it, like.
Did that come from anywhere, or do you just, you know, you just did it?
That was just inspired genius.
He just had that magic moment during that take, and that's it. If you ask him to repeat what he just did, he's gonna say, I don't know, I just played, you know, and this is the magic.
I don't remember. You know, you make it up as you go along. Right? One of my favorite things is Apocalypse in 9/8, you know, where it all just fitted together. I was off one day. I don't know where I was, and I came back the next day, and the guys had written this guitar and bass, dum 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 dum. So I came back the next day, you know, and we were talking about what they'd done the day before, and I just played along with whatever I felt like. That became one of my favorite pieces to play. And that happened just by luck, really, and not knowing what you were doing some of the time.
If someone thinks all Phil Collins was 80s pop radio hits, I recommend checking out Selling England by the Pound from 1973. We'll listen to that record from beginning to end. If you don't think Phil Collins is a genius just from those 45 minutes, I can't help you.
Selling England by the Pound, I think, is their best album. I think, like, there's too many great songs on this.
Selling England by the Pound, The Lamb, and Foxtrot, those albums ended up being huge, huge influences for me.
Dancing with the Moonlit Night, Know What I Like, Firth of Fifth, Cinema Show, like, just to name a few off of it, they're all great, but those specifically, they're such classics, you know?
Yeah, it was kind of my Billy Cobham period, because Cobham with Mahavishnu blew me away, you know. Wonderful record that is.
They paid him a lot of money to say that. To me, it was the English sound. It was the British.
You know, it was a little overcomplicated now, probably.
It's quite a reference for young people who go, who's Phil Collins?
The generation of drummers who were coming up in the 70s, I think they're well aware of him. But, you know, when I grew up more in the late 70s, 80s, you know, everyone knew his pop stuff. You know, I don't think there was an appreciation, even amongst drummers, of what he could do.
I think he is the most underrated of all the prog drummers. Everybody talks about Neil, everybody talks about Bruford, but I think Phil's influence and importance in that, you know, 70s, 80s prog era is just as important as those guys.
I have a photo of your kit from this tour. And this is the first kit that actually looks like a Genesis kit.
Yeah, I know.
With the rack on the
added
back.
rack, added floor tom.
It's the old Gretsch boy again.
These drums sounded great. You know, so different to what the concert toms were.
Concert toms.
So now you've transitioned to concert toms. What made you kind of start doing that as opposed to like the double-headed kits that you've been playing until
Well, they're easier to tune, is one thing.
But my dad hated changing heads. That's part of the sound is when they were played in. That sound that when it's a new head, it's a bit too clean.
Yeah, you gotta break it
I
in.
guess, yeah. That sounds like they're supposed to. Brad Marsh, our drum tech, he would sit there before he would show up for sound check, like stepping on him, hitting him for like 2 hours to make sure they were like played in enough.
I hear a lot of attack. I hear a really great attack. I hear a lot of the top skin.
It's just so confident and so groovy and
powerful, and I love it. I love it.
So these, I'm assuming these are the four, I guess 4 rack toms, concert toms he has up
The
top.
8, 10, 12, 15.
That's the kit I used on Face Value as well. So that's the in the air sound, if you like. The top 2 concert toms were pearl, I remember, but the rest were Premier.
Open bottom single-headed toms, like what a great thing, what a great move. And he always used a small, like a 20-inch bass drum, which has an incredible sound.
What a great kick sound. Right there. Oh, floor toms.
Nice.
Yeah, 16, 18. The floor toms, for how I would think most drummers want their floor toms to sound like. The concert tom makes a lot of sense. There's not much resonance. You can get a lot more kind of thud, out of it. I mean, I remember you telling me you didn't have to tune him. You just hit him harder. Was that the truth?
Yeah, he beat them into submission.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was all rim shots, but I know he's like hitting the hell out of the drums.
I could be wrong, but something about if the drums didn't sound good to him, he just hit them harder.
I thought he's doing this because he's looking to present his personality through a drum set. Yeah, no problem with that. It worked. It worked.
Some of the fills and some of the parts that have been in my dad's discography, whether it's Genesis or him, like are so signature to that drum set, and you can't really replicate it without having that kind of sound.
So now for that.
When's the last time you sat behind this kit?
I don't really know.
Has your dad told you like about his first experience like being the singer?
The transition from drummer to singer is fascinating to me because
one of the stigmas with drummers are that we're not musicians and we should just kind of keep our mouths shut and sit back there and, you know.
There's always classed this thing as like you're a drummer and or a musician. It's no. We're musicians, you know.
Sometimes I go back to like some of the old stuff where he was just singing this very, very gentle, like backup in the sweetest little voice. And you think, oh, what a nice little voice he has, you know, and then it happens.
That's when he did the massive crossover, and when Phil Collins became more than just an incredible drummer with Genesis, he became an iconic entity unto himself.
That part of him that allows him to literally go from behind the drums to the very front of the stage, it's bold, but to me, that's Phil Collins.
Not only did he step up and become the singer, but he did it beyond what people were expecting from him.
In the Cage, growing up, listening to that on repeat, the live versions with Chester playing, I'm pretty sure it's a concept album. That was way before my time, but this was the last one Peter was on.
I mean, look, they were already successful and had a fantastic singer, Peter Gabriel. And when Peter basically left the band, instead of breaking up, Phil took over the microphone, and instead of getting moderate success, they got even more successful than they were before.
Almost near the end of the tour was when he said he was going to leave, so they were still had to play shows knowing that, so they just didn't know what they were going to do after.
I think halfway through America, he told our manager, and I think Tony Banks got wind of it. But from then on, we knew that Pete could leave at any time. But we had a 150 show tour to do.
You know, some people just start singing. You're like, dude, where'd you learn how to sing? I don't know, I just sing, you know? So he had this thing that he focused on and became an amazing singer.
If I had to move from the drums to being the lead singer, I think I would just die. I don't think I could do that at all.
I mean, I was the one that said, when Peter left, right, let's do it instrumentally, you know?
Yeah.
And everybody jeered and told me to shut up and get back in my box. But, you know, I can see that they were right.
You got to also understand, Phil was a young actor. This is a very important part. As a young actor in England.
He did a lot of theater as a kid, so maybe that could be what like made it kind of easy for him to just assume that kind of role.
The theatrical experience definitely helped me get up on stage and not be nervous, you know.
There's stories about after Peter Gabriel quit, like they were having auditions. And so like they were just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna audition singers. Like we're just gonna get another singer, you know, hire some, you know, well-known British dude back at the time. But Phil Collins was like, yo, hey, I got this. I can do this.
As far as like the audition process goes, I think he just wanted to be asked by the guys because he'd done backing vocals, and he didn't want to be like, I'll do it, but he kind of wanted to be like, Phil, you know, what do you think if you did it?
It was not in my mind to become the singer. It's just nobody else really wanted the job.
He became the lead singer of Genesis. I think that's stunning.
We had a long search for a singer that didn't amount to much. I used to sing all the songs at the auditions to the guys that were singing, you know, or coming to audition. And I started to, in general, sound a bit better than they did.
He had a great voice, great killer persona on stage as a frontman. Yeah, it didn't bother me.
But was it kind of easy for you because you knew how Peter sang and you knew the parts, or did you just kind of go about it your own way?
Well, I kind of went about it my own way, but I was singing melodies that I'd grown up with.
Trick of the Tail, this was the first one he sang on. Lots of great songs. For him to come out with this album as the first one he sang on, like with Dance on a Volcano being the first track, I think that was big.
The first Genesis that I really was passionate about and got into was the kind of the Phil Collins era where he was singing. My very favorite Genesis album is Trick of the Tail.
When you listen to the confidence and the husk of his voice from Trick of the Tail and right when Duke and Abacab, he had a thing. He was just full-on muscle man vocally.
From the first show, the fans loved him because he was part of the band already. It wasn't like a new guy had to come in and be like, you know, win over the crowd.
Yeah.
My excuse was always my voice has been there in the background, whether it's backing vocals or the odd lead vocal here and there.
And then this is one of my favorite pictures. This was taken at the last ever Genesis show with him and Peter. And that was really special. It was emotional to see them together because I think that there's this like misconception that like there's like this beef because they were both singers, but they love each other. And
when Phil started to sing, he knew how to step into that role of that song. We were cheering him because we believed in him.
When Peter left, I didn't know Peter left. I thought it was still him. I thought it was Peter and it was Phil. And I went, get out of here. That's amazing.
It's funny, I was still called the new singer. I joined in 1970, 74, Peter left, and I've been there ever since, but I'm still the new singer.
Him stepping up, that's saving the day. That's like Superman type stuff right there, man.
It just looks so dull. You know, if I was singing the whole show from behind the drums, you know, I didn't find it physically difficult, sorry. You know, especially with the cymbals and you're putting a screen up. We didn't want to go there, really.
He was just a drummer. And then everything changed when the microphone was put in front of his mouth.
The first gig I did as a singer was in London, Ontario. And I went on and I didn't let go of the mic stand. That became my drum kit. It's kind of very eerie. I always missed being behind the drums, you know. I thought I was better at that than I was singing, you know, so I missed it.
I don't even like the sound of my own voice when I talk, and I can't change that. So you're just gonna think to yourself, hey, command the stage, you do it behind the drums, let's see if you can do it in front.
Did you feel vulnerable going just by yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine anything worse.
And also, it wasn't my idea, but in terms of clothes, you know, I'd had some clothes made.
At least it wasn't the costumes, you know?
Oh, that wasn't me.
No.
That was Peter. You know in a second if it's a mistake or not.
Was it?
Yeah. It was awful. Peter just had this aura, you know, the costumes and the drama, some of which he didn't do very naturally. but he did it because there was a lot of instrumental stuff. And, you know, what do? You either go off stage or you stay there and do something.
The costumes and all the things that he would do, I mean, that's classic Prague. What would progressive rock be without that era, without Peter Gabriel dressing up as a flower, or a butterfly, whatever the hell he was doing, yeah.
You know, and he had this bass drum for a long time. I mean, he was a drummer as well. So when I was there on stage, he'd be wild with his bass drum and tambourine. And it gradually got filled with carpet so you couldn't hear it, you know? Because there was lots of, it's the closest we ever got to, you know, take off your clothes and live, you know?
What do we got in here? I'll let you rip the tape.
Oh, this one's new. I thought this was gonna be, he'd end shows and it would just look like a bus ran over these.
Yeah.
Like the way he was just like
Just the way he likes his heads.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a way of working with it now where, you know, the audience can laugh and I don't feel bad about it. You know?
I just want people to know that he's a drummer, ladies and gentlemen. That became a singer.
I saw him as a drummer first.
Once a drummer, always a drummer. And I even think that he said somewhere that I'm not a singer that plays the drums, I'm a drummer that sings.
I'm not a singer that plays a bit of drums. I'm more of a drummer that sings a bit.
He is a drummer first, and I think in his head, he's always been a drummer.
Phil's a tap dancer. So you gotta understand that Buddy Rich was a tap dancer. Tap gives you a movement and style of rhythm, and Phil carried that into the drums, creating a feel that is communicating with the audience to pull the audience in. Phil did that all the time.
The Genesis stuff is a little complicated and it's a little tricky-dicky, but my stuff is quite simple.
It's his fills that are so signature to me.
And here comes the Tom fill.
That one groove where it just goes da da ga goo goo ga with the cymbals and the kick, and you go, ooh, wow.
Turn it on again. Check that, go, go, go. Get out. Such a powerful feel. The discipline of knowing he has the chops to blow, but just those simple quarter notes or eighth notes or triplet.
You know, simple things are usually the best.
It was like a staple to do a drum duet on all of his tours.
And I get a call from him at the hotel. He goes, hey, Luis, there's always a piece in the middle of the show where there's a drumming thing. If you want to put something together, put it together and let's play it.
Phil, what was your inspiration for the two drummers? Was there a band or someone else you had seen?
No. Well, there was quite a lot of stuff that I was not singing on, that it seemed, you know, obvious to go back to the kit.
Was that almost like your version of the costumes? Was being able to go back to be able to play the drums?
Yeah, but there was, you know, I had to become a singer if I was going to stand there and do something.
Yeah.
You know, where I could go back to the drums and be me.
I'll see bands that do like the double and even triple drummer thing, and I'm like, kind of like, why?
I love the intricacies of two different drummers playing at the same time.
But that was always a very special kind of a moment, and I think they really were able to play off of each other.
It grew from me and Bill doing like 16 bars, 32 bars, whatever, into Los Endos. And when we used to come off, me and Chester, the crew would be there with the scorecard. You know, tonight's drum duet was 10 minutes and 44 seconds. You know, and they'd bring it out because everybody disappeared, you know, they went and got a beer or something.
It's such a drummer's thing to like, okay, watch this, you know?
The drum duet was it was almost like a song, you know, and to have like an arena or a stadium be so into just a drum thing was like the coolest thing for me.
You know, anytime you bring the drums to the forefront of culture and mindset, it's a great thing. So thank you, Phil.
There was a fantastic song on Santana album, and the tune was Promise of a Fisherman. That it blew my head away. And I said, why can't we do something like this?
Yeah.
And that's what Los Endos turned up as.
They were like breaking rules. So again, I said, this guy, Phil, this guy's a rule breaker, man. I loved it.
Los Endos, I think that's a pretty good middle ground between everything. You've got the big kind of tom fills. You've got a lot of that proggier stuff that was in the track when it was recorded. But I think, the middle ground, I think Los Endos would be a pretty good one.
Phil's just burning on it. Chester's with him, burning on it, and they do these drum trades, and it's fabulous. And those guys play together so well.
To have two amazing drummers doing that, again, in that kind of arena environment is pretty special. And, you still don't see it nowadays, let alone, back when they were doing it.
Did you enjoy writing that and being able to just have that as part of the set, other than obviously the songs you were playing?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's where I lived. And I was very pleased to go back there.
Few people know that he had a band during that time or before that time. When I first got introduced to Phil Collins, and I heard this record, never heard about it before. I bought it and discovered Phil Collins only because it was an interesting name band, Brand X.
Phil Collins used to be in a band called Brand X, right?
I saw his name of drums, Phil Collins. Oh, and then when I got home, I played it on the stereo. And man, it was so sensational, unbelievable.
It just seemed like Brand X was kind of the serious version of what he was able to do, right?
I mean, there's a lot of notes happening. It's like you hear Mahavishnu Orchestra and Return to Forever and Cobb. I mean, you hear all that stuff in there, and it's like, oh my God.
Brand X, that's astounding bad. It didn't change the face of fusion music in that time.
It's interesting because I feel like, obviously now with newer generation, you ask people, who's Phil Collins, they're going to tell you the singer. Or they'll tell you the guy who wrote In the Air, but then there's the people who know that you were the drummer of Genesis, but then there's the people who knew that you also did Brand X stuff, because I think it's surprising when you hear the drumming on this.
Listen to Brand X and your head will blow up.
My mind was soon to be blown. Is mad.
What was the thought behind making another mainly instrumental project?
Well, I was listening to quite a lot of fusion stuff, and one day I got a phone call from Island Records saying, I fancy coming down to the studios because, they got a good band, but they need a drummer. And I went down another day and sat in with them and just played all afternoon. This music wasn't fashionable at all. So we just did very few shows. But I did aspire to them playing in America. So we did go to America once.
America is such a massive scope, like the States. So you become international from a, little island in England. It's a big step.
We played the Roxy in LA, and it had a curtain, So we'd run a tape, all edited together. And then the curtain would rise, then it would lower again, Yes, it was mayhem, chaos. And then one of the guitar players got bored and the singer got fired. And we became the Brand X that those people that do know about it, that's the Brand X we became.
We've got a photo of Brand X. I think this is 78.
He was a genius. Well, he's still alive. Percy Jones. John Goodsall, the guitar player, died not long ago. But it was never quite as good as it could have been. The guys would never play the same thing twice, which, can be inspirational, but it could also be frustrating.
I was just finishing up a record with Jack Bruce up at the Manor, And I got a call from Phil, and the call was, would I like to come and play in Genesis? But the problem was I just signed with Jack. We've signed a record deal with our Robert Stigwood Records. I can't really do it.
Bill Bruford was there before Chester. I almost joined Yes, actually. I went to see them loads of times at the Marquee. One particular gig, the guy I was sitting next to said, you know, they're auditioning for a drummer. And I said, you know, no, but I loved what Bill did. Anyway, I went backstage in the little pokey dressing room, and John Anderson gave me his number and said, sure, man, call me, you know, in his squeaky voice, and I never did. And I often wonder what would have happened if I had have gone. You know, I mean, I wouldn't be here doing this, probably. Bill and I became great friends, and when I took over the singing, he was in fact, I was rehearsing with Brand X, and he came down to the rehearsal and said, what are you doing? And I said, Peter's left, and we're gonna go out on the road. So we're looking for a drummer so that I can sing, you know. And he said, well, why don't you ask me? I said, well, I didn't think you'd be interested, you know. And he said, no, I'd love to, I'm doing nothing. Bill was, you know, obviously he was a favorite with the fans because of his Yes connection. But Bill constantly put tripwires in front of him. You know, and I tried to convince him that sometimes it's okay to do something that's a little predictable so that we know where we're going, you know? But I think he felt he'd been there with Yes, and he was gonna be going to King Crimson at some point. So I don't think that interested him that much.
I thought, oh my God, you're gonna be playing with Genesis.
Bill, I think, had just left. I think he had done the first tour, and he called Chester because when I got up to the rehearsal room, Chester was rehearsing with Genesis.
When Chester started playing live with Genesis and was kind of the guy, you know, Bill would kind of come out and be the front guy.
I must admit, I asked Chester to join before I'd played with him, before I'd met him, because I'd heard the Roxy and Elsewhere with Ralph Humphrey. And there was this one song called More Trouble Every Day.
Every drummer loved that one fill, which Ralph Humphreys and Chester Thompson played.
Da 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 da, you know, the riff that I've put in everything now. And remember, none of the guys had met him. I'd only spoken to him when I asked him to join, and he came over, and the first thing I asked him to do was to play that riff. And then, you know, I played it as well, and we put it in wherever we could.
My dad and Chester, I think their chemistry was great. And I think Chester, you know, at the time he was a huge deal, but I think now people don't really put him in the conversation when he really kind of should be there for some of the great drummers. And I think he's super responsible for their live success and continuing to be, you know, such a big live band in, you know, once my dad became the singer onwards, because having any drummer trying to replicate those parts, you know, may not have worked out, but Chester, like, it made it seem like it was still a Genesis show. It didn't seem kind of weird because somebody else was playing drums on it. You don't have the most stable throne, so you should be careful going back.
Yeah.
The next album was Wind and Wuthering, which I think is kind of an underrated one of your albums with Genesis. This is your second album as the singer. What was it like at this point, writing and just kind of being more comfortable with that role in the studio as well?
I don't know. 1975.
One that you personally wanted on the list was What Gorilla?
This was very influenced by Weather Report, and it's one of my favorite things that Genesis did.
For What Gorilla, did the drum part come first, or was your drum part a
Yeah.
response to something else?
No, the drum part, you know, was just one of those things that I played to warm up.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys joined in, I guess.
Follow You, Follow Me off of, and then there were three. So now it's just the three of you guys, it's just you, Mike, and Tony. Was the dynamic different that it was just you three now?
For a long time, it was Genesis wrote everything. And then when Peter left, we decided to get more specific and let people know who was responsible for what. I'll always remember that when the record came out, Chester was still in Weather Report. He was playing it on the Weather Report bus. And Joe Zawinul said, "Who's that?" "That's Hip." You know? And when Chester told me that, I was blown away. Because it's a love song, you know.
On the reunion tour, you went back on the drums and played it while you sang. Was it like a specific kind of vibe and thing that you kind of just...
Well, I think the consensus was that it felt better when I played it. There's some things on that record which I can't play today. Well, I can't play anything today.
Was it hard to play at the time, or was it just, over,
No, at the time, it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, easier, certainly, than it was. We just went for it, and we didn't do it many times.
Mm-hmm.
God.
There's one song, Down and Out, from And Then There Were Three, which I know me and Nick were going to include in the original list, and he said, "I don't know if my dad wants to do that one."
Well, that period of Genesis, And Then There Were Three, I'm not particularly fond of. This is just, from a personal point of view. I mean, I do some fills on Down and Out that I couldn't do today. Well, I did them in the studio, and they worked great. But that was when I was, I'd only just become the singer a couple of albums in. So I was very intent on chops, trying to do things that I had never done before. So Down and Out is, I haven't heard it for ages, but it's a period piece.
This is the one I had as a kid, so I still have it. This one, the first song, come on. Behind the Lines, and that was it. Bam, 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 bam. Get that to that. You know what I mean? Power.
Stuff of Genesis, and then how he transformed it into what it was later, than his own solo stuff. The music's very different.
I think he sort of modernized Genesis.
These prog people that loved Genesis in the 70s were kind of like, well, what is this crap, And it's like, well, it spoke to the masses, and I love that. I think that took balls.
If they would have stayed in the old prog rock kind of area, that wouldn't have worked today.
It was honestly very difficult for me to watch not only Genesis, but some of the transition that a lot of the prog bands went through when they were almost like trying to become a little bit more commercial, and then some of them really failed miserably at becoming commercial. Of course, Genesis was able to, on so many levels, have a lot of success with that.
Phil Collins was a legit drummer, but really what gets me is his playing on the pop tunes.
When Genesis were in like the mid 80s or early, just the 80s in general, I think for them, obviously as a band, they were in their prime, and the set list was now so you had the prog stuff, but then you also had the newer stuff. And you can tell he's rocking that 80s haircut,
Oh, yeah.
that 80s mullet.
In a sold out Wembley.
Yeah, that's such a statement.
Yeah.
And during the 80s, you can see that they were trying a lot of electronic stuff. They were really trying to come up with something different.
The gated reverb thing with Hugh Padgham. What's more 80s defining than that?
Phil Collins was pretty much the music, the pop environment.
Oh, I remember hearing Phil Collins on the Genesis record. And thinking this is really good.
At the Melody Maker Awards, which back in the 70s was held every year, and all four Zeppelins and Peter Grant, their manager. They turned up to collect, I can't remember what it was now, but we won International Live Act. And I remember them walking in. It was almost like we'd stolen a bit of their thunder because they were huge then. I just kicked myself for not going over and saying hello, but they had such a bad reputation, you know, with their crew. They just, you know.
Less said about that, the better.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that, Phil. That is it. That is the one.
Phil's drumming is so iconic that every single time I'm in a rehearsal, the MD, the musical director, will say to me, do the Phil Collins thing. And I know exactly what that means. It's usually the
How can you sing gated reverb, I guess is the question.
a little bit of the gated reverb, you know, a little fuzz.
This sounds like some Wriggle shit.
What was the thought process behind doing your first solo record after being in a band for so long? Were you nervous about putting it out and then, you know, writing it? What was it like just doing it by yourself?
You know, it was, if I was honest, and why start now? I remember very distinctly, Ahmet Ertegun was in London, and he and I always got along great. So I went up to his house, and we had a couple of drinks, and I said, I got a cassette here, if you want to hear it. He said, I'd love to hear it. So I put it on, and they were just my demos, you know. And he said, whatever you do with this, I want to be involved. Which gave me the kind of confidence I needed. So I went home quite full of myself. And there was no real drums on anything.
Those old drum machines?
Yeah.
We were in England and we were rehearsing at Shepperton Studios. I was going to be leaving and having a car take me back, and he said, are you going back into London? I said, yeah, I could give you a ride back there. I sat in the front seat with him, and he had a cassette, and he had In the Air Tonight and I Missed Again on his as demos. And I didn't know yet what kind of writer Phil was, because he hadn't really stepped up as a writer. And when I heard In the Air Tonight, just a cassette, and I thought, this will be great on an album. I didn't listen to that song and say it's going to be a hit. I just thought it would be a great album track.
As soon as the drums start that up, you know, you could feel kind of a bolt of energy go through an audience.
Then drummers may be like, man, that's a simple feel. Anybody can do that. Maybe true and say it, but it's the energy that comes along. You know, that energy is inside that feel, so you feel it. You feel it a certain way.
And so when I left Phil, I just thought, he's going to do a solo album.
Once he started going in the solo world, and it was very impressive.
That drum sound. That's the sound, you know. I mean, it pretty much dictated the rest of that decade.
I just froze, man. I was like, what is that?
And you could see, like, physically, people would react to it. And I remember Clapton and his guys saying, fucking hell, what is that? So it was just a little thing. But that became the flagship.
That huge sound it created, I guess accidentally, just became a staple.
It's become a staple. It's like the fabric of the universe.
I just want to play this. And Phil Collins is the reason why I own this drum machine.
I actually learned about him through there was this amazing commercial in Australia with a drumming gorilla, and he did the In the Air Tonight Phil. And I was like, who the hell, where did this come from?
That Phil kind of had another life of its own in Australia, because it got used in like a chocolate ad, and it was like a gorilla, and it's the start of that song, and it's just fading in, and then it really goes crazy, and yeah, it had like another life of its own, maybe 10 or so years ago.
On the original demo In the Air, you'd have to hear it to believe it, but There was no Phil. It was just a stranger to you and me. Dum, dum, I can feel it. Ba 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 ba.
Do 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 do. Ba 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 ba.
Smoke a bowl and put that thing on and try to guess when it's coming. And just, you fall off the chair. It was so good.
I still think one of the greatest moments on stage for me, and it's consistent every single show, is In the Air Tonight. The anticipation that builds up in an audience.
You got to wait to get to that part. Like, it don't happen in the beginning, so you got to be patient.
And at the last second, this other third drum kit would come up out of the floor and he would step into it and do the fill, and the place would go insane. And I just sit there just going, genius.
I guess it was the 96, 97 Dancing to the Light tour. I used to walk around the stage and then, go up a few steps. And then I'd get to the drum school just in time. And I was walking around and I didn't see the usual lights coming up. And I thought, that's weird.
At this point in the stage, there's only one kit there. His kit isn't there anymore. And so he's singing the song and he's walking around and everybody's getting a little nervous. They're like...
There was no drum kit. It was on a lift, but it was still on the floor inside this hole in the middle of the stage. And I didn't know what to do,
Everyone that listens to that song, even now, they're waiting for that fill, right? This tension's building.
So I jumped into the hole and I, of course, played the fill.
Yeah.
And sang it, but none of the audience could see me at all. And at the end, I came out of the hole, explained to the audience what had happened, but you can't play that song again, with it all happening.
Got to be a little more creative with it.
I want to settle the debate on the fill.
The In the Air fill, we don't know necessarily. I mean, I know how I played it, but I don't know if that's correct. Of if there's a kick between the floor toms. So if it's, or if it's...
First one.
Nothing in between. So I played it wrong for a whole tour.
We're both wrong. There's no kick in between.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fallacy about the In the Air fill is that it was all carefully thought out, That's the fill that I did, that particular take, on that particular day.
He changed the world of drumming, the sound. Everybody had to get a noise gate after that. Come on.
We went into the townhouse, which had this live room. I'd done 3 or 4 tracks with Peter, and if you were to sit in there and clap or, play the drums, you really didn't think it was that live. It was stone, but it wasn't really that live. But if, I'd worked with Peter Gabriel in there and realized that if you put the microphones in the corners and compressed them, it sounded fantastic, And he said, what is that? I said, nothing, I'm just playing with the sound I'm hearing. He said, well, give me that for 10 minutes. So I played that, no deviations, no fills, for 10 minutes. And I went into the control room. I said, well, what are you going to do with that? And he said, I don't know yet, but I'm going to use it on something. Well, that became The Intruder. And I said to him, can I have a copy of that drum loop? He wasn't too happy about it. I just wanted to remember the sound.
Peter Gabriel's solo record that he played on with Intruder, the birth of the gated reverb.
Hearing Intruder for the first time, and I had to find out who is this playing drums, and it's Phil Collins. I'm like, oh my God.
So by the time me and Hugh Padgham had gone in to do my tracks, and In the Air came up on the list, there was still no drum fill.
And from what I've learned about that, he just played it off the cuff, didn't think much about it.
I mean, I must have done 4 or 5 different fills while Hugh did his finessing, and that was that, you know, and I went in to listen to it. We all agreed we didn't have to do it again.
In most any musicians I know, they record something and 2 days later they wish they'd recorded it a different way. I can't imagine Phil Collins ever feeling like that.
And Armit was very hip, you know. When we cut the record, and he said, "Where's the downbeat?" I said, "It's there." He said, "You know that, I know that, but the kids won't know that. So you're gonna have to put some extra drums on." And we just spent months finishing this record. So I went to a studio that was run by 10cc, and I set a drum kit up in the hallway and played along to the mix. That's what came out as a single. But on the album, there was no drums, apart from drum sheet. Yeah, it changed my life.
Coming in the air tonight.
Night!
Hey, thank you.
You know, you never think it's going to happen to you. I mean, I never had any doubt in my ability, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen, you know.
The fact that we're living in the time of Phil Collins is almost equal to what it was like when people were living in the time of Mozart.
The greatness of this artistic being and all the influence.
I'm so happy that I grew up in that time where this is what great pop music was.
It's timeless. What he's done is timeless. He got classics.
Wow, Phil Collins, this name is everywhere. This guy is doing everything.
An amazingly accomplished drummer who also went on to be one of the most successful solo artists of all time.
Do people realize that they're living in the time of someone like Phil Collins, of greatness that will be around 100, 200 years?
I remember specifically my mom brought this record home with this dude's face as big as the record, like, you know, because this is vinyl days. And his face was like, bam, here I am.
Well, you know, trying to find a cover for a record is like giving a baby a name, you know. It's not the easiest, unless you put your face on the cover, of course, you know, when that's easier.
It's probably my favorite one of his solo albums. I think it's like the most expressive work that he's done.
You know, he was great at everything, and when he'd sit at the piano, he was great. When he's singing, he's great.
Now we're starting to understand that his musicianship is bigger than just the drums.
For me, it was kind of inspiring to see drummers becoming really hit makers and producers.
And I think this was like a big moment for him to just be able to do it himself. It's a lot of what wasn't used on Duke ended up kind of coming on here, but actually Behind the Lines, which was on Duke, but changed it. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it with him, but they're rewinding and it was faster. And he's like, that's kind of cool. That sounds like a funk song. And he asked, like, can I use that on like my solo record? Before we go into Face Value, we wanted to bring up your Behind the Lines version that's on Face Value. How did that, I mean, because it's the same track, but obviously a completely different context. How did you come up with that?
We were at ABBA's studio in Stockholm, and we were recording Duke. And, you know, an easy way of erasing things, if you wanted to clean up a track, was by recording it, you know, putting it in record at double speed. And so instead of bum ba dum bum 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 bum, it came out as bum ba dum bum 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 gong 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 gong. And we all looked at each other and said, hey, it's the Jackson 5, you know. And then Mike and Tony, because I had kind of, you know, this thing with horns, they said, you should do it. So I think I got a copy of it sped up, and it became one of the songs on Face Value with the horns.
So Phil Collins
played with Genesis at the Niedersachsenstadion, which holds about 60,000 people, right? They sold that out, I think, twice, okay? And then Phil came back with his new solo album, literally, I think half a year later or a year later, and sold it out 3 times. That's absurd. That's like obscene success. That's unbelievable.
We're back with your solo stuff and Take Me Home from No Jacket Required. Do you remember much about writing that? I mean, to me, like in a way, the drums, they're placed as almost like overdubs because the main thing is the drum machine.
Yeah. The idea was I did all the drum machine parts on real drums throughout the song, and then we faded the drums in so that slowly the machine became real drums. Playing with the drum machine, if you've got a band and you've been rehearsing it, is okay. But concert for Montserrat, you know, the studio in Montserrat and George Martin, it had very, very bad storm, or the volcano. I don't know, the volcano was later. It kind of erupted, and that was the end of that. So all the people that had been to Montserrat and recorded in his studio, we were asked to put together a concert at the Albert Hall. But I just decided to ditch the drum machine, and I started it on congas. And it worked really well, actually. And I think that's where it started to stray away from the original version.
What made you start using drum machines?
Well, we in '77, we went to Japan, and Roland offered to give us 3 of the new drum machines that they just kind of finished. And of course, I had yet to do any of this. And I said, I don't want a drum machine. And I can do without that. So I came home. I called up Pud, who's been with me all his life. I said, where's that drum machine that I didn't want? And so he said, oh, wait, it's in the barn, I think. I said, well, get it out, will you? Because I might find a use for it. I mean, I used it on everything, to be honest. And then if I didn't need it, I took it out.
Mm-hmm. But this, I love all the Simmons pads on the side and how you started integrating them. As, you know, there's that drum solo where he starts playing the Simmons as well as the real thing.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you played a Simmons and how that kind of started?
Back in those days, like 4 mica heads, and they were supposed to be, you know, like very bad for your wrists and everything. Now I think I'm probably paying the price.
Dude, they're so hard. They're too hard to play. They hurt.
It was Formica, like your kitchen counter. And that Formica was a completely different feel than what the drum was like. So I believe the same thing happened with a lot of the Simmons players. They played it the way you hit a drum. And you can't. Because now what happens is you accept the shock. Trigger finger, carpal tunnel, tennis elbow.
I mean, on the album, we just used the Simmons. And then eventually we got into the triggers on stage. So you'd have a mixture of live drums and Simmons. I mean, there was so many tracks that just, the character came from whatever was happening on the drums, you know?
Invisible Touch, so some more Simmons. Do you remember, so when you came up with that, was that just revolved around that kind of fill, the or was that kind of placed in after that, you know, the guitar and keyboards and...
It was based on a guitar riff of Mike's. I programmed something so I could sing, and I just started singing. She seems to have that invisible touch, yeah. She seems to have that. And that ended up being one of my favorite Genesis tunes.
I still have Genesis cassettes. I think I can find in the garage right now Invisible Touch.
I remember that as a kid. Every time I'd come home, you know, just like, you know, whether I was 7 or whether I was 12, no matter what, you know, complaining about a girl or something, you're like, hey, that's what Invisible Touch is about, man. You know what I mean? And I have that vivid memory in my head from, you know, me being a kid.
The Simmons drums were not my favorite phase of drumming in general.
I know there's the little trigger sensors in there too. Because, you know, he was using a Simmons kit back in the 80s, but then he started, like, you know, they had the module and they just, you know, plugged it in to the actual drum. So it was.
I didn't know he actually triggered them off his acoustic kit back then.
But what was cool is like, you know, you could hear that they were blending the real drums with the triggers, which like to me made it made the live version sound a bit more normal. Because like Home by the Sea on the record is straight Simmons, which is, you know, when you're in the studio it sounds, but like live having the kind of the beef of the real drums.
More thin.
Yeah, it helped a lot. Is that second bit of Home by the Sea where the Simmons come in, is that all kind of just you playing around with what you were hearing, or was that kind of a groove that had been sitting around for a bit?
You know, I'd gone through some of the presets and I never really got too much into it, you know, inside the thing. But that was definitely John Bonham. I mean, it can't all have been When the Levee Breaks. I mean, by this point, we had moved into the Genesis studio, and that had a live room, but that live room was totally different sound to the Townhouse live room. Still Stone, but different Stone, you know? I used to crank it up through these monitor speakers and played with the sound. And then I came up with the rhythm of the second part, if you like. And then we kind of improvised a lot around it. We had the groove plan, you know. I just started improvising. Home by the sea. I don't know why I sang that, but home by the sea. We'd always wanted a studio of our own because we didn't want to keep looking at the clock, you know. And it didn't matter. I mean, we used to go there for weeks and just improvise.
And at this point, you started doing a lot of work as producing records. You know, any memories about how that was different to doing your own thing?
Who mentioned, what is it, Frida?
You know what blew me out from Phil Collins is when he did that song for Frida from ABBA. It's not an intricate, hard to do thing. The groove of it is amazing. Like, that was a pop hit.
I loved the song he did with Frida. I Know Something's Going On. That song's badass.
Feel, groove, production. What do you say?
Something Going On by Frida. It's like, that's Phil. I know it. It's got to be, you know? Then you look it up, and it's like, yeah, Phil Collins, he actually produced the record.
With all these things that you did, all these performances, was there anything else that you wish you could have done? Maybe an artist that you could have played with or a band you could have played with?
Joe Zawinul. You know, I just love what he did. We played the Syndicate North Sea Jazz Festival, and there was Tower of Power and Buddy Guy. Joe Zawinul came to my caravan, you know. It was indoors, but there was no dressing rooms. And he, you know, it was like meeting God, you know. He invited me over to his caravan, and we had a couple of Sliboviches. We exchanged numbers, and I stayed in touch with him. You know, he used to send me postcards, and I would send him messages. But I wish I'd have played with him, although I would have been scared stiff. So no, I have no feelings that I wish I'd pursued this or hadn't done that. Because, you know, one thing leads to another.
He played on one of Robert Plant's first solo records called Pictures at 11. You wouldn't know it, and he sounds like Bonham. It's incredible.
The drums are just jumping off the airwaves.
I remember I was at home, the phone rang, and I picked it up, and, you know, this guy said, "Hello, is that Phil?" So I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, it's Robert Plant here." You know, and I was quite starstruck. And he said, "Do you fancy playing drums on my record?" I'm doing a solo album. So I went to Rockfield Studio and I kind of took over a little bit. You know, sometimes you got to whip people into shape.
Yeah.
And he's never forgotten it. I mean, I was doing Genesis and my thing, and I mean, Zeppelin were in the past. And he read that as encouraging him to go out and start again, really. Mm-hmm. And I was very proud to be part of that.
Phil being called by the Robert Plants and the Eric Claptons, as well as Genesis being in stadiums, and then Phil's like, but I got to do a tour, and I'm in stadiums, and I'm topping the charts on my own.
I did 2 Eric Clapton albums, and one of which I was producing, and the other one that Jamie Oldacre was playing drums. That was Behind the Sun. We did one song together, me and Jamie, which is Just Like a Prisoner. That was a magical session.
I mean, when people asked you to produce their record, was it kind of expected that you were going to play drums on it? I mean, I know you said this one, you had, you know, somebody else as well, but was that kind of the case, you think?
I think some people thought they'd get a matching tie and handkerchief, you know. You produce it and you play the drums and you give us an In the Air Tonight. I mean, I did a track. I just played on it, I didn't produce it. Tears for Fears, Woman in Chains. And they had the backing track, and they even had Alita Adams' vocal. And Roland said to me, so the drums come in here, and we want something like an In the Air Tonight feel. You know, and you can only really do that once in your life. And I said, you mean you want you want me to come in with something big? And he said, yeah, like In the Air Tonight. There's a bit of that baggage that comes with you.
You know, I always loved the drumming on Easy Lover.
Up next, we've got Easy Lover, which is you and Philip Bailey.
Such a great tune. What a groove. What a groove. What a groove.
I think it is pure gold.
I mean, the Chinese Wall is quite a good album. We'd gone through the whole record and we hadn't done anything together. So the literally last couple of days, Philip said we should try to do something together, you know? And we'd done most of the hard work already, so I said, sure. And we just, literally just picked a few things out of the blue, and then I went home that night and wrote the words. It was originally called Choosy Lover, but it
doesn't have the same ring.
No.
It seems like in the time to record it, he just played once or twice, and that was it, because it sounds so fresh, so natural.
We did a version, the first night we wrote it, just so we wouldn't forget it. And what we ended up using was that, because it had an energy and sound, and George Massenburg was a fantastic engineer.
That's a beauty piece of 80s pop. He kind of quotes himself with the drum fills on that one too.
Good album, that, and happy memories, Used to have curries most evening and a pint of lager. And Philip Bailey was not used to that at all. But we became a thing where we'd have to have our pint of lager and lime. Good fun.
That's, as far as I know, is the only song that you produced that wasn't on your record that always was in your live show. Was it just because it was just a hit, and since you had written it, you felt it was right to put it in the set as well?
Yeah, it's one of those examples of when you capture something with the sound, the energy of writing it as you go along, Yeah, I mean, it became a, stage favorite too.
Through his career, he's been a pioneer in beats, grooves, fills that are important, recording, engineering, production, the sounds.
The gated reverb thing was only a thing because he decided to do it. And I think the artistic kind of vision of just like, do what you want to do, and if it's good, people are going to like it. And I feel like the 80s was very big, powerful. I mean, that was kind of the decade, right? Like that's what everybody was kind of striving for.
The room recordings were so present back then in the 80s and late 70s, you know.
Drum gods of the late 70s and 80s were actually really influenced by Phil Collins.
The do. Mine is da da ga. The influence goes into our recordings directly, pretty much.
Everything has a purpose. Everything is musical. You could almost sing all of his fills back.
God, did it again!
Baby, just one more night.
The hits, the motherfucking hits out of this guy is just like amazing.
Seuss's Studio and oh come on, I mean those were the hits.
Hitmaker.
On a lot of his songs, when we were in the studio, he was just kind of humming melodies. He hadn't really come up with all his lyrics yet.
A lot of people ask, what does Sussudio actually mean?
Sussudio?
Yeah.
It was just nothing. It was a word I made up and I couldn't think of anything else better to replace it with. So I just kept it. I mean, my oldest daughter had a horse called Sussudio.
Was that after or?
That was after.
It went through different incarnations as different tours went on and finally just became this giant showcase song.
Say, Phil, what do you think about this?
I Don't Care Anymore off Hello Must Be Going. So this is your second solo record. I think this one was the year after, but I don't know how long you took to get back into the studio straight away.
Yeah, I don't remember now.
We did that at the Genesis Farm rather than at Townhouse Studios in London. We were out in Guildford or wherever.
Very cool studio. The hallway going into the drum room was just lined with platinum records and gold records and stuff. And then
We'd be sitting in the studio and I'd look out the window and like a deer would come and look in the window and stuff.
Hello Must Be Going was a little harder because I didn't have so much, apart from a few leftover, building blocks. And I hadn't been on the road on my own until I'd done 2 albums. So there were some things that were really good on that album. I mean, I Don't Care Anymore was quite a big song.
The drum part creates such a sort of like menacing type of vibe, you know?
When I was doing that track, vocally, we were sitting down listening to it, just having done the master vocal. I said to the tape op, the assistant, I said, the vocals should be in by now. And he was recording over it. So I had to do that again. The horn players, I was quite tight with them by this point. But these guys, they couldn't drink. And Thomas Washington, who was the arranger, Tom Tom 84, he was on the Earth, Wind & Fire records, and I thought it was a computer, because their stuff was like, and it turned out Tom Tom 84 was this guy, talk like that, and I think he'd hit the bottle early in the sessions because he had Hugh Padgham crying, just wash my fingers, Hugh. When I do that, you punch in. He was told to start recording by Tom Tom. And he wasn't ready, He didn't have a balance really yet. It was not a very happy start to that record from their point of view.
There's so many cool grooves that he does that are really just based around the kick and the toms and then maybe the snare. That's unique, man. Not a lot of rock guys do that.
The drums on that start with the microphones inside the concert toms. And as the song progresses, it gets liver and then it goes back at the end to it being,
Wow, this is how Tom should sound.
And also, I was using a different drum machine, awful thing, called The Movement, and the Eurythmics had used it. And I don't know why I got hold of one, but the sounds were different. So on that track, you get this kick on kick, like these like metallic sort of sounds. And I used that on most of the record.
A lot of drummers think that the groove starts with the toms, but I think, Nick, I was talking to you and you said that the groove starts with the kick.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the one is the one.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, I saw it quite normally and naturally, but some of the other guys, you know, I had to count them in because there was no beat where they were used to having a beat. In fact, even on the last tour, Brad Cole, the keyboard player, you know, sometimes would be on the wrong beat.
Yeah,
And
take a bit extra long to come in with the keyboard.
It's not labeled which ones are which, right?
No,
No.
there's no numbers. I would assume this one's for the ride.
The ride symbol. Ride A. Great sounding ride.
Especially the cymbals in a so high position looked great, but it's not that good for the back. I know Vinny had the back problem because of this, because he's sitting so low. Simon also.
Don't know how that works. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with this.
At that time, years ago, the gear wasn't that great. The sound systems weren't that great. You didn't hear things that well. You were always generally uncomfortable performing at that level.
It almost looks like it's like a soda cap thing.
You know, we had cymbal stands. You crashed a cymbal and it fell over.
Look at these, man. These are ancient.
I mean, you start playing, you're playing, and in the first tune, your drums are falling apart.
I'm gonna put it like this. I don't know if it's
nice.
So now you're not comfortable and you're reaching, you're adapting. We had too many challenges years ago that affected our physical adaptation that were working against him.
Was this just always the setup, or do you kind of wish that maybe you had set it up differently to prevent, you know, what maybe happened to your back from having to be like this the whole time? Or were you not thinking about it at the time?
Yeah, it always felt natural to me. I mean, not particularly like it is now, but when I was playing, you know, I could get things in the right place.
There's this movement, and if you look at the way Phil had his drums set up, it was all up here, and these toms are all around here, and it looks like it's hard to play because it is.
You have a China or a crash back here that you're trying to get. The next day you're like, oh my God, I feel like probably a pitcher that just, you know, threw out his rotator cuff.
I think he spent mostly his hours thinking about how great of a song to write and how big of a hook he could create with the drum part. And I applaud him for that, and I think that's amazing.
Dude, half of these are like strips.
This is from 1999 on the Big Band record.
Yeah,
The promo for that.
This is cool. I love like the signature jazz thing, you know, with the initials on the front of the kick. And I think not a lot of people know that he did the big band, but I think that was, he grew up super influenced by jazz. And I know that was something he had to do. And I think Buddy Rich's band was his backing band, like the horns and some of them, you know what I mean? As well as some of the guys in his band. Like I think Daryl was involved, Brad Cole, Luis Conte.
Some people go out and they have money and they buy a yacht. He bought a big band. It was a lot of fun. We did a couple tours with that.
I saw him playing big band. I seen him playing drums. Quincy Jones, I think, was directing. I just saw this guy, he's killing.
What made you want to start your own big band after all this time? And I guess in a way now you're celebrity-wise or just popularity-wise, you're kind of peak of your powers, and to go and do something completely different where you're not singing and you're not doing all the hits, you're doing a jazz thing.
It always appealed to me, the sound of, you know, it was something that I kind of felt I had to do at some point.
So to go out on tour and exclusively just play jazz music and just completely change gears and do that, I think was, you know, really ballsy, and I think it was great.
His superpower as a drummer is his versatility. He can do it all.
I mean, the original premise was that we'd get big band arrangers to take a pick of whatever songs I had or Genesis had and arrange them, you know, for big band. We did pick up the pieces which was 25 minutes long, and we did 2 shows in a night. So by the time we got round to the second show, everyone was completely exhausted. And when we first rehearsed in Montreux, someone came up to me and said, "Oh, we're going to have a 10-minute break." I said, "What for?" "What are you going, you weaklings."
I wonder how it was advertised when fans were showing up. Is it like, it must, because I'm sure, I know the kind of person he is. It would have been like, by the way, this is Jazz. I'm not gonna be singing In the Air Tonight. I'm not gonna be singing, all this, playing the shows, and maybe people being like, well, play In the Air or something. Like, did you ever get that?
No, I think it got up people's nose that I didn't sing. On the second tour with Alita Adams, they didn't want to hear her sing. And I was offended by that. And I said to them, I won't be singing tonight. And even in LA, Quincy Jones came on stage just before the encore and lectured the audience about how they weren't gonna hear stuff like this again. And I'm thinking, yeah. In Detroit, I came off stage and said, fuck them. Because usually I came back on and sang a couple of songs. Not that they would have been satisfied with that, because they weren't the songs they wanted to hear. They were standards.
But this kit was the kit that he had set up downstairs when I was a kid.
Okay.
And so the first kit when I sat on his lap and started tapping was the big band kit. I don't know where it is now. I'm sure it's somewhere in storage.
I was asked to play in a Grammy salute to jazz. The phone call I got was like, did I want to play with Tony Williams and Buddy Rich? And I said, yeah, sure. And I went into the rehearsal room, and there was Buddy on his kit, Tony Williams, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, B.B. King, Dizzy Gillespie, Stan Getz. There was all of these names. So I sat down at my kit, and Buddy Rich said, 50 years in this fucking business, and all they give me is 8 bars of brushes. And Tony Williams said, I'm playing mallets. What are you playing? So I said, I'm playing sticks. And suddenly I had the best gig. And the guy handed out music, and I went cold,
The funny story about this is he doesn't know how to read music. I don't really know how to read music either.
So what do I do with this?
My dad would listen to it and then make his own version, and his notes were almost looked like a comic book. It was like pow, bang, bang on 4 or whatever it was.
People used to come around and look at my parts and laugh, It didn't make any sense to anybody else. Fortunately, it made sense to me. And the arranger counted off the tune, and it, da, 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 da. And I said, oh, why don't they write that out, Oh, I shudder when I think about it. Well, after about 2 or 3 run-throughs, I went up to the arranger and I said, I don't think this is for me. It wasn't always smooth, and I kind of am grown up enough to know when to extract myself from the situation. Because there's no point in just being there to make up the numbers when really you shouldn't be there at all. And before I left, Buddy came up and said, so you produce records. How about producing one for me? He said, call me, of course, I'd love to. So it all came around in the end.
The Tarzan soundtrack. Yeah.
The tribal jungle beats are so appealing to me.
I think I'm at that age where maybe the first Phil Collins music I was aware of was the Tarzan soundtrack.
This is brilliant what he did, how he captured the feeling of the storyline into pop music, into a Disney movie.
People tend to sort of, it's only a cartoon. I mean, I worked for 5 years on that. and then another couple of years on the stage musical. I mean, I knew that stuff backwards and forwards. I mean, it's not kid stuff.
You'll be in my... That's Phil, no?
No matter what. Yeah, that one, right? Like that's
You'll Be in My Heart. Dude, I've listened to that song 750 times.
This was a Tarzan premiere. Horrible haircut. Like I said, like as a childhood, I just knew him as like a solo guy and like the singer. And so Tarzan was kind of part of that too. And that kind of being a soundtrack to me as like a really kind of young kid.
Did you start with the drums and then move to the melody, or was it the other way?
Yeah, I mean, it starts off with some rhythmic pulse. I mean, Tarzan, obviously, you know, I mean, I got thought of for Tarzan, presumably because of, you know, the drums, you know, to be involved in that, you know, working with an orchestra, and especially when the musical came out, you know, I had to write some new songs, and that was some of the best stuff I did. And it was me stretching my envelope as a songwriter.
Was that a tough decision to make, to end that last tour and officially retire, or do you still miss being on the road?
It's still kind of sinking in a bit. You know, I'm 71. I've spent all my life playing drums. To suddenly not be able to do that is a shock.
We don't really ever know when we're gonna get the last piece of creative work from an artist.
If you were walking down the street and met Phil and you had no idea who he is, and you got into a conversation and you said to him, "So what do?" He would say, "I'm a drummer." Before anything else, man, he is a happy camper sitting back there. And that's also one of the real heartbreaks, was that fact that he lost that.
It breaks my heart, you know, because I was first a fan of his drumming, and he, you know, I was slayed by the stuff that he did behind the instrument.
You know, I mean, the drumming has taken its toll on my hands, legs.
It's terribly sad that somebody so talented and so good at that has had that sort of taken away from them.
What we get to see is the fruits of their labor, but we don't know exactly how tough certain moments are for them.
If I can't do what I did as well as I did it, I'd rather relax and not do anything. If I wake up one day and I can hold a pair of drumsticks, and then I will have a crack at it. But it just, you know, I just feel like I've used up my air miles, you know.
Like the suspension on a car, you know. You do put 100,000 miles on it, and the suspension is going to suffer. 50,000 miles, no.
Oh.
I've been touring for only 13 years, and all my joints and everything are feeling it already, because you do 6 shows a week. And
the guys through the 70s and 80s and 90s, they went 100, you know?
That style of touring to where it is now, obviously you're seeing all of that catch up to not only Phil, but a lot of other, you know, incredible, iconic musicians.
People in bands in general had like this thought that like they're invincible. And I think that's why you saw that reckless behavior of like, you know, when it was like The Who or Zeppelin back in the day.
I'll deal with it later. We were invincible when we were teenagers and young.
So I think that's really what it is with my dad. It's just this kind of sense of like, you know, you're a drummer, you're invincible, you just do what you do, but you don't know it's going to take a toll in the long run.
His physicality was compromised enough where he had to really walk away from it.
I didn't know how serious it was, though. I had no idea that he was having the kind of problems. And I didn't even know that until about 2016, when we did a Little Dreams Foundation thing that Nick was involved. Nick was like, what, 16? And Phil said, Nick is going to be playing drums. And I go, what?
So we're almost at the end of the video now, and I hope you guys have been enjoying it so far. Just wanted to remind you guys again that we put together a free ebook for you guys with some behind the scenes photos, some sheet music, and some more information about the songs that my dad has been talking about. You can check it out at the link in the description, and it's totally free, and it'll help you get more out of the video.
He could easily just go, that's it, I'm done. But he's trying, and you got to admire that.
In this way?
Can you talk a bit about your dad's injuries?
He's kind of had a few injuries like throughout the years. I mean, I think it all stems down to like, you know, playing drums and the issues that he's had with his back. I mean, he had back problems throughout the years, and I mean, that goes hand in hand with just getting older. But I think, you know, he had a big surgery on his neck that stemmed from all those years playing drums and just bad posture and stuff, which caused him to have drop foot, which basically means that in one of his feet, he has like no sensation, which is why he can't really play drums and why he has to like walk with a cane, because he doesn't just have that control that he used to anymore, which sucks. And I know he wishes he could like sit behind a kit and just play the way he could. It is what it is. And what I can do with that is just like learn. And even when I set up the same kit, like the concert drum kit, I have to set it up differently because I'm like, I can't go down that road. No, there's no way. Maybe. I refuse to think it was this bad. For my dad, it was more, he was great at playing drums, and that worked, and that setup was great, and he could do everything he could do. And I don't think he was necessarily thinking about, you know, this is gonna take a toll on my back in the long run. Like, he was fine.
Phil would walk out and he'd have a cane. I could see that some people thought, oh my God, what happened? Then he'd sit down in the chair and he'd say something to the audience and he'd just win them over.
Man, it'd be like 80,000 people going crazy. And you realize at that point that they don't care what condition he's in. They want to be in the presence of Phil.
But man, you know, having all those issues, he still went out there and toured. He's a real trooper, you know.
All of us in our heart of heart fantasies always hope that we'll get that call and say, let's just do one more. You know, just one more time.
Well, we are Genesis. And we are here to entertain you tonight.
At that point, I was totally understood the magnitude of Genesis coming back. And so it was also kind of a level of nervousness, like, are we gonna like be able to like pull this off?
Those are heavy shoes to fill, whether it's your pop or not. It's like the weight of the world is on your shoulders.
That's an inspiring story that he's not like, okay, I'm retired, I'm done, I can't do this anymore.
Nick is kind of carrying the torch for him now, which is really cool.
I'm sure Phil must be very proud of him.
We were playing, I don't know what year it was now, the Albert Hall. Mike and Tony were there in the audience. You know, we played there 5, 6 nights. It was suggested that, hey, you know, because they were all impressed by the fact that how well he played. It sounded like me when I was younger, with a bit of fire, and well, they both agreed that it could work, you know, and that kind of sold me on doing the band thing again.
And I think me being able to do it with him definitely helped him want to get back on the road. Because I think by the end, he just wanted to be with his family and spend time with like the people that mattered to him. But I think as I started playing charity shows, maybe the idea may have popped into his head. And after the US Open, he asked me, he was like, you know, I'm thinking of going back on tour. Do you want to play drums with me? I'm like, absolutely, you know.
I saw it as giving Nick a taste of what life could be like, and also an opportunity, if you like.
It was some of his first performances in like, you know, almost a decade. But the first show for his tour, which was in Liverpool, it was like a warm-up show that we did because we were gonna go do like 5 nights at the Albert Hall in London. We did that, and that was the first show I played, and that was like the most nervous I've been. And at that point now, I've realized the magnitude of he's coming back, he's doing shows again.
He gave the people something, because Phil still was on stage doing those songs, performing, being a great personality that he is.
And even though he's not playing drums and just singing, he's still delivering the music like the young actor that's inside of him.
Nick was like, what, 16? And I've known Nick ever since he was born, you know?
He came out, man, just nailing all the parts on it. And then Daryl told me, like, when they did the Genesis tour after that, his playing had gone up like another 50% at that point. He was that much better.
I had done my homework, and they knew that, and so they felt comfortable playing. So I think that was the first thing that eased everything. I was like, okay, so musically, we're okay.
I never looked at Nick as like, he got in the band because he's, you know, yeah, he got in the band because he could do it.
I mean, I'd known Daryl my whole life, and I'd played with Daryl for a couple of years on my dad's tour. So him being there was like a real kind of like, you know, it was just very reassuring.
The first rehearsal, it was like, what?
Right away, even stepped up more than I even expected.
I forgot about this one, which was me during my teenage years with my red and black Mapex kit in my childhood bedroom. I was getting into drums, but it was, you know, I was still kind of trying to find out what I wanted and what I liked and what I wanted to do. But when I, you know, started playing in bands together, that's when I was like, realized that like, that's what I wanted to do in life.
Obviously, you can tell that he's had some influence and training from his dad at such an early age because, I mean, who can play all that stuff at 16?
Are you going to go around the world with it? You got a passport?
Daddy's interviewing you.
Have you got a passport? Uh-oh.
Did you teach Nick how to play when he was younger?
No. I didn't really want to be responsible for that.
But yeah, he definitely was a huge help when I needed, you know, like to ask him some questions. But he also sometimes like totally gave me pointless advice where he'd be like on Supper's Ready, I was like, Dad, like, you know, I just can't really get this part down. The keyboard solo doesn't seem to be in 9/8, but you're playing 9/8, but then you're doing something else while, you know, while Chester's doing something. He's like, I don't know, dude. Like, he's like they wrote that. I was away, like, you know, and then I came back, they'd written the riff, and I just kind of recorded what was on Foxtrot. And I was just like, that does not help me whatsoever, dude. Like I'm like, I need some sort of guidance. He's like, just remember the riff.
No, I used to just learn the riffs, you know, I mean, the...
But I remember you telling me when I asked you, it was just stick to the riff and know the riff. And maybe he wanted me to figure it out by myself. But I think like a big part of it, it was, you know, the way he approached it was very live, very feel-based, and kind of wanted me to kind of do the same thing with, you know, all the songs on the set. And then this big one was one of the first like charity performances I did with him, probably asking him for advice and him telling me that he didn't know either, you know, which is the common theme when I ask him for advice.
We used to have this thing, secret number 1, secret number 2, and I was amazed at just how there was a groove even when he was very, very young. My way of helping, not teaching, but helping, was to have these things which we called secrets.
It was either like special secret number 1 or secret number something. There was a few little tips, and I guess calling it something was a way for me to remember him. And it was like, you know, stuff like keeping the hi-hat going while you're playing a groove on the toms or on the cymbals, or always hitting the kick on the cymbal, or keeping the kick going through fills. And that kept going for quite a while. That was like the kind of easy way for him to give me some sort of tip while not kind of being overbearing and you know, too much.
You sit down and play the bass drum with your foot. You're using the hi-hat more, you're playing more rhythms. More!
He'd be playing something and go into secret number 3. You know, it was constantly getting better and constantly getting better.
The biggest instruction was put your earplugs in. After all like the ear damage he's had from over the years of, you know, having wedges and...
You know, I'm a bit deaf in this ear.
On the last Domino tour, you had the chance to play with Nick on drums. What was that like for you, being in the front and being able to turn around and see Nick on the kit?
Yeah, made me immensely proud. There's so many times when I've seen him play from when he sat on my lap, you know, through till yesterday when you were sitting on my lap.
Now you may have noticed up on stage here, thrashing the drums, ladies and gentlemen, my little boy, Mr. Nicholas Collins.
I mean, one of the funniest things Phil would say when he was introducing the band on stage is he said one of the best things about having Nick up here is it brings down the average age of the band considerably.
It was so cool for me being in a band and being in bands. The Genesis thing was like, you could just tell there was 50 years worth of friendship and love between them. You know, great memories, not only to share with my dad on his kind of last tour, but also to share with them, you know, as well.
It's strange to even think about it. I mean, if you'd have told me 17, 18 years ago that he'd have been playing in Genesis or in my band, you know, come to that, but it would have, I'd have laughed. It's so unlikely, the chances.
The worst thing that actually happened to me wasn't drum related. It was, I would do this little piano bit with my dad on his solo tour. We did You Know What I Mean, which was like a really cute kind of father-son moment. But I was so terrified of playing that piano part because like, I'm a drummer, I feel comfortable behind the drums. With piano, I don't have that. And I think something must have happened where when they were setting up, maybe something was, somebody pressed a button. So all of a sudden I start and it sounds really messed up.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. It's fucking broken. I can't play, Dad. Can't play, it's broken.
The lower half of the piano was the way it was supposed to be. And the other one was like an upright bass that was in a normal tuning. And I just had to tell my dad, I'm like in the middle of the song, I'm like, I gotta stop. Like, I can't do this.
Yeah, well, that was one of the highlights of the show, you know.
And and like, he was like, oh, the keyboard's messed up. And everybody's like, oh, you just messed up, you're blaming the keyboard. I'm like, no, I swear it was the keyboard. Like, and that like traumatized me. Like I had, like the rest of the show, I was pissed. I still have nightmares about it.
You've never forgotten it, have you?
No.
Hey, and here Nicholas is in New York, where he's visiting Daddy with Matthew and Lindsay for the first time, and he's taken the city by storm. The crowds are loving his piano playing. Yes, he does a very good bow.
The worst thing about having another drummer, if it's not you, is you don't want to be turning around all the time or twitching because they're not doing what you do. And I found that Nick had enough of me doing what I would do and bringing something new to it as well.
For different songs, there's definitely the fills. There's a certain vibe and approach you have to take to it. And just knowing my dad as a person and as a drummer is he was so expressive behind the kit. He never played really the same thing twice. It was always a feel thing, and that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken from him now as I've gotten older.
That transition from let's figure out how to play as much as we can around the kit to let's just be musical is something he's passed on to his son Nick.
It's all about feel, and the best drummers never kind of were comfortable doing it. They were always trying to do something new.
When I went to see Genesis and Nick was back there, he did such a great job. He was playing it all so well, and I was like, this is so awesome. You just feel like it's the guy's son and he's doing it.
Sometimes things feel very different when you're playing it as opposed to when you're singing with it or when you're listening to it. So, no, I mean, I'm so pleased that we did it, but there were never any rough moments, were there? There was never any, doubts. It just went ridiculously smoothly. It was something that I wouldn't have altered for the world.
We all have to grow old if we're lucky. You gotta deal with these physical issues.
It's all right.
You want to have a seat?
Yeah.
And Phil, for you, what's it like to hear all of this music? We covered so many albums, to revisit all of this music.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Genesis's biggest fan. There's stuff that I like, stuff I'm proud of, stuff that I'm less so. And sometimes, it can be like people throwing bricks at you. I mean, I've enjoyed it, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've enjoyed it, and it's been an interesting trip down a memory lane. Some bits may be better than I thought. Some bits aren't as good as I thought. When you've been doing something for, I've been playing drums since I was 5, There's gonna be dogs, There's gonna be things that you're gonna enjoy hearing back, and others not so. That's it.
That's everything. Look, you gotta have a party.
That's just so striking to me, how many different iterations of the In the Air Tonight Phil exist on this planet.
It's kind of funny that his name is Phil Collins because he got the ill fills, you know what I'm saying?
Fills with Phil. You know.
It's just so funny to hear people like interpret it in different ways. But I guess for me it would be like tra-da, tru-du, 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 dan-da, ish.
I will do it in my most German voice then, all right?
But it's all about the room mics in that bad boy.
I think I'll keep that. Yeah.
It's a bop.
Break for lunch?
Those drum tones and grooves to this day, man, it still hits the same way, you know, it's timeless.
I hope that he's remembered as the great, great prog innovator that he was.
It's okay. I've had a very good innings, as they say. And I've done it, you know, most of the things I think that I wanted to do.
First he was the drummer, then he was the drummer who sang, then the singer. What next? Phil Collins.
People have enjoyed it in the main. I've got nothing to complain about. I've got 5 great kids. I don't want for anything. So you know, I'm one of the lucky ones, really.